Hello and welcome to the shop. Today I'm going to be making a pen as a thank you for a gentleman named Jack McCauley. Let me tell you a little background on this story. For about the last 6 months or so, I've been having sound issues with my camera. Well, my sister contacted me and told me that she had a camera that she had replaced, bought her an upgrade, and I could have her existing camera. There was nothing wrong with it. It worked great. So she sent it to me, but there was one catch. When she bought it, she only bought the body because she uses all these fancy lenses. She's really into photography, so she didn't buy the little basic lens that comes with the camera. Jack heard this story, and I had asked, can anyone tell me, what is a good lens to look for? Because I was going to go out on Amazon and purchase one. And he said, don't buy one. I've got one. I bought a camera. It came with a lens. Jack is into photography. He's got all the specialty lenses that he prefers to use. He said, I'll just send you the lens in trade for a pen. Well, one thing I can do is make pens, and I agreed because I was really excited to have the lens and the camera combination and be able to film and get decent sound quality for you guys. So Jack's request was a modified Slimline made from a Chaos blank. So I told him in our emails back and forth that I was making a brand new batch of these. I just finished them. So I picked one out that I thought was a really nice looking, I think you have a nice looking pen body. And what we're going to do today in this video is I am going to make a modified Slimline pen for Jack McCauley. So Jack, I really hope you enjoy this video. Everybody else, I hope you enjoy it too. And one last thank you to Jack for sending me the lens. It works incredibly well. So thank you very much. Jack requested a modified Slimline. He does not know this yet, but he's going to get a modified Slimline as well as a modified mechanical pencil. So let's talk about what we need to do to make that happen. For the modified Slimline, the stock tubes will work just fine. For the modified mechanical pencil, we're going to use a single tube, so we're going to end up cutting a custom length tube, and we need to know what that length is. Now, luckily, the tube lengths are the same for the mechanical pencil as they are for the Slimline. So if we take a quick measurement, you can see that that is right at 2 inches in length. So if we multiply that by 2, that's a 4-inch tube. I'm going to grab the center band from a mechanical pencil, and I'm going to measure, and it comes out to 0.161 inches. It's not quite a 1/4 of an inch, but I tell you what, we're going to go ahead and call that a 1/4 of an inch. So we're going to make a custom length tube at 4 1/4 inches. I've set my calipers to 4.25. I am a fraction over, but that's not a big deal because as we clean this tube up, we'll end up shaving a tiny bit of it off anyway. I'm going to make a mark, and you can see right at that mark to the right of the mark is the 4.25 mark. So we're going to go ahead now and get this tube cut to length. I'm going to use a tube cutter, and I picked this up at the local hardware store. They're not very expensive. It was under 10 bucks. I don't even remember what I paid for it, but you just spin the little knob, open it up, you lay your pipe inside of the cutter. I'm going to tighten it up a little bit here. And the wheel, I don't know how well you can see it, but there's a wheel in there, right there. I want to put that wheel on the line that I want to cut, so to the right of the red mark. I'm just going to dial it in. There we go. Make sure everything is square in the cutter. Okay, we give it a snug. We twist it, and we just snug and twist. And what this does is it will cut right through this brass tube and give us a nice cut. I can feel it just about to finish the cut. You could get more aggressive. I went relatively slow with it. There we go. And now we've got a nice tube that we're going to measure here in a second. Should be roughly 4 1/4 inches in length. I brought a tape measure over, and I'm going to put the tube under the tape measure, and you can see it comes out right at 4 1/4 inches. It is the perfect length. We do have one problem to address. Take a look at this end of the tube. This is the stock end, and it's nice and sharp. It's got a great edge on it. Flip it over and look at that. It's kind of beveled a little bit. The cutter will bevel the tube. That is not a problem. We do have a way to fix that, and I'm about to show you how I do it. Before we fix the tube, I want to talk about one thing. I get asked about this drill bit all the time when I make these modified Slimline and modified mechanical pencil kits. This is a 5 1/4 inch in length, high-speed 7mm drill bit. The part number is starting to wear off, but it's PK7MM. And I'll put a link to this in the description, but this is the bit that I use to be able to drill all the way through my blank to accept a 4 1/4 inch tube. I went to my set of punches and I grabbed a 15/64 inch punch. Now 15/64 is one size down from 1/4 inch. We're going to slide it into the good end of the tube. The bevel will keep it from coming out of the cut end. I'm going to use my soft grip pliers and we're going to give it a good grip. And we're going to give it a couple of pops with a hammer. There we go. Only took one and the punch went right through the end of the tube. Take them out of the soft grip. And now very lightly, we're going to reform the brass by just tapping it with the hammer as we roll it back and forth on the hard surface of our table saw. Light taps is all it takes. And look how easily that punch flows through that tube. There's the, let me get that on the camera. There's the end that we just fixed. There's the stock end. This tube is ready to be glued into a blank. While I'm chucking the bit up, I use the 4 1/4 inch tube to make sure that just a fraction of the bit will extend past the full length of the tube. And I do this because I'm drilling a 4 1/4 inch length with a 5 1/2 inch bit. So I want to have as much of that bit in the Jacob's chuck as possible. And that should give me about 3/4 of an inch. And that should be a pretty good bite on the bit. This next step is probably the most critical in the entire process, properly aligning the bit to go straight through the blank. And that's compounded by the fact that these are chaos blanks because they're very difficult to grip in your vise. With the chaos blank, I don't use the jaws at an angle like you normally would to grip the blank. I know that both sides have been cut, so they're flat, so I go ahead and stick the blank into the vise, and I'll just snug it a little bit. I'll bring it over to the bit and I'll lay it right against the bit and I'll just eyeball it and make sure it looks like it's running straight down through the blank. Then I'll flip it around like this and we'll eyeball it from behind. I don't like that. I want to straighten it up just a little bit. That looks pretty good to me. Let's go back to the back of the blank. Are we going straight down through it? And I think that's going to give us a straight shot right down the center of our blank. I'm ready to start drilling, and once again, you've got to kind of eyeball, because if you look down the blank, you'll notice that this little piece of walnut is way farther in than this piece of maple. So I need to make sure when I drill this one that I start my hole closer to the back of the blank so that I avoid a blowout as I come down through the walnut. So I'm just going to basically eyeball this blank for any shallow pieces, and I can see, I know you can't see real well, but there is a piece of maple that is the same as that piece of walnut. So we want to stay toward the back half of the blank, which is right about here. That should give me a decent hole right down the center of my blank. Since I'll be drilling from the side for the purposes of the video, I'm going to readjust and recenter my hole. And we're ready to drill. One thing you want to be careful of with these blanks is as you're drilling, you're going to hit different hardnesses of wood. So sometimes the bit is going to just really dig quickly into the blank. Other times it's going to kind of slow down. If you notice some resistance, you may want to bring the bit out. You want to clear it. And if need be, if you feel this bit and it is super hot, you may want to pause and come back to drilling in a couple of minutes when the bit cools, because the heated bit can cause expansion and it can cause the blank to explode. I'm going to start by cleaning the bit, get all the debris off of it, and I'll just knock it out of the way of the vise. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to loosen the blank up in the vise, and I'm going to put it onto the drill bit. We'll loosen our press up, and I'm going to start raising the press. Now notice there's still a little bit of play. I don't want the bit to come through the bottom of my blank and hit my vise. I don't think it will, because the blank really is about 5 1/4 and I'm only drilling 4 1/4, so I should be okay. But we're going to go ahead and just play it safe I'm going to re-grip the blank. And now we're ready to continue drilling. I stopped, and there's a reason why I stopped. I realized that I made a small mistake. It's not going to hurt anything, but I didn't give the bit any travel. So what we're going to do is realign this. We'll put it up on the bit. I'll bring the tray up on my press. A little bit more. I want enough to get a good grip, but I wanted some play so that I can move the blank up and down, and sort of the last few little chips that are going to get caught in there as we drill, I want to be able to relieve them. That little readjustment was necessary because when you have the blank up on the bit like this, you can't clear the chips. And I had quite a bit of distance. I still have quite a bit of distance to drill into my blank, so we're probably going to have to do that maneuver one additional time just to make sure that we're not drilling the hole too large because of all the debris that's trapped inside the bit. This should be the last time. We should be able to finish drilling. We're going to go all the way up until the bottom of the Jacob's chuck kisses the blank, and that should give us the perfect depth hole for our tubes. And that's how we drill 4 1/4 inches into a blank. Let's get the other one drilled. I'm back over at my bench, and I was preparing to use the tube to measure the length of the blanks and cut the excess off, and I noticed something. When I insert this tube into this blank, notice how we have a nice tight fit around the tube? But when I insert it into this blank, I've got a little bit of a gap, and you can see it right there if you take a close look. There's a little bit of a gap around the tube, and what's going to happen is if I leave that gap in there and I start turning this down with a Slimline especially, as I get close to the end of the turning, to the bushing, I'm liable to have a chip out or a blowout with the end of this blank. Now my guess is that's probably just right on the outside, so what I'm going to do is come in here. I know I've got roughly 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to cut about 1/4 of an inch off, take it back over to the drill press, drill the last little bit, and test again. And when I have a tight fit, like I have with this blank, then we'll be ready to trim the blanks and do our glue up. I'm only going to cut a small section off the end of the blank, so I'm just going to go ahead and freehand it. I'm going to bring my tube over, and I'm going to check my fit, and look at that. I don't know how well you can see it in the video, but I've got a nice tight fit, so it was just the outside area of the blank. Now we'll take this over to, as a matter of fact, yep, we are just a little shy. We'll take it back over to the drill press, and we'll just drill about 1/4 of an inch farther into the blank, which will give us the perfect fit for the tube, and this blank will be ready for glue up. After I cut this blank and turned the camera off, I went ahead and grabbed the first blank, and I cut about 3/16 of an inch off of it, because when I reinserted the tube into this blank, I liked just how well it fit. The diameter of the hole I drilled was perfect for the tube, and I thought, well, just in case there's any play, I want to alleviate the possibility that I could have an issue. So I trimmed that one off. I took them both over to the drill press and I finished drilling the hole, and they both are just a fraction over 4 1/4 inches. So now from the end with the hole, we're going to measure back, and I'm going to leave just a lip there. And on this end, we'll leave just a lip. Do the same thing with the other blank. And now I'll take these over to the bandsaw and we'll get the excess material removed from our blanks. Again, I'm just going to go ahead and freehand cutting the little excess off of the blank. And the main reason why is as we glue the tubes in, we're going to come back and square these blanks. So it doesn't have to be perfect as long as I leave enough meat to where the tube can be fully inserted into the blank. On the second blank, I cut right down the center of the red mark, and look at that. You can see the hole, and right there is the point of the drill bit, so that was the perfect place to cut that blank. This one, we don't see our hole yet. Right there, I think, is the point of the drill bit, so I'm going to go ahead and shave just a hair off of this blank. And that's perfect. That is exactly to... We were just a fraction off, and that's perfect. I'd rather have too much and cut twice than cut too much off of the blank. Let's test with our tube. The 4 1/4 inch tube goes into the blank. And I don't know how well you can see that, but there's a maybe a little over, I don't know if it's 1/8 of an inch, maybe a little larger, 3/16 of an inch. That is just below the surface. It's got a pretty tight fit, so I'll use another tube to push it out. And let's test it in this blank and make sure it's long enough. Just below the surface on this end, and once again, you can see we've probably got about 3/16 of an inch. So that is absolutely perfect. We can now center and glue our tubes into our blanks, and then whenever we square the ends of the blanks on the belt sander, we'll get rid of the excess material. These are perfect and ready for tubes. I need to prepare my tubes to be glued into my blanks, and roughing them up is a good idea because it gives the glue something to grab to. Now this blank that I cut to a custom length, you can see that it's already roughed up, but we're going to rough it up just a little more. The tubes that came with the Slimline are just as shiny and slick as a piece of glass. I like to lay some sandpaper on my table, and I just roll the blanks as I rub them back and forth on the sandpaper. And that gives me a lot of nice scratches and gouges, and that's what the epoxy is going to grab into and be able to hold on to help keep these blanks, or to help keep these tubes inside of these blanks. Now, on the Slimline, you only have to rough up one tube because the front tube is going to be slid in and held in by friction from the transmission, so we don't have to worry about that one. But I am going to go ahead and rough up a little bit more the 4 1/4 inch tube. And that's all it takes. These two tubes are ready to be glued into my blanks. Well, I'm very sorry, guys. I just walked you through the entire process and I realized my camera was off. What I did is I took my Play-Doh, rolled it up into a ball, shoved my tubes into the Play-Doh to plug them. Then I covered the tubes in epoxy, slid them into the blank, and made sure that both ends were just slightly below the surface of the blank. On the that is the Slimline mechanical pencil. On the Slimline pen, you can see I've inserted the tube just below the surface of the blank, but I only glued one tube in. The second tube does not get glued into the blank. We set these aside to dry, and when they are dry, we'll be ready to start turning them. I wanted to point out I laid down a little bit of painter's tape here, and this is what I mixed my epoxy on. And because I mixed it on this painter's tape, I can pick it up like this. I can roll it over on itself. I can toss this into my trash can, and I have no issue with epoxy on my work surface or epoxy sticking the trash to the side of my can. Just in case I didn't record the beginning of this video, I wanted to point out that I was using Loctite 5-minute epoxy to glue those tubes into those blanks. We'll let them set probably an hour, hour and a half, and they'll be ready to turn. I'm ready to square the ends of my blanks. Here is the mechanical pencil blank. It'll be simple because there is a tube all the way through the blank, and we can square right to the end on each side. This is the modified Slimline. It has a tube on one end and it's nothing but wood about this far up on the other, so we've got to be real careful. What we're going to do is take our second tube, go ahead and drop it into the blank, and there is probably, I know it's going to be hard to see in the video, there's probably a little over 1/4 of an inch of meat here. So I'm going to take this over to the bandsaw and I'm going to trim off just a little bit to bring this wood back so we have less to square, and then with the tube inside the blank, we'll be able to square it with our jig on this disc sander. I just removed some of the material from the end of the modified Slimline, and we have about 1/16 of an inch of wood before we hit the tube, so it's perfect. We're going to go ahead and true this one first. I've decided to turn the modified mechanical pencil first. I've got it chucked up on the lathe here between centers on some 7mm TBC bushings. My apologies if it's not as clear as it usually is, but there's a plexiglass shield between the camera and the blank. This is a deflection shield for any chips that get thrown up. They hit this shield and drop, and as they do, they get pulled back into the dust collection system. Just want to stop real quick and take a look at the blank and see how it's turning out. It is amazing. Look at that. We're almost true. I'm just a little bit from being true here, which is not an issue. That'll come in a moment or two, but I just love how all of the different woods just sort of melt into one another. I've got the blank down to the bushings on both ends. I think it looks absolutely amazing. I love the look of this blank. It's just gorgeous. All those different woods melded together. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put a single coat of thin CA glue on this blank. We're going to let it dry, and then we'll begin sanding. And that single coat, you know, like when you look right here, you've got this piece of maple. This Paduke will bleed into that maple, and so will this darker wood, which I believe is a Spectraply. This wood will bleed into these lighter woods. But if I put a coat of thin CA on here, let it soak in and dry, we'll be able to sand, and we will not have the bleeding issue. And plus, we're not going to have to sand. Now, if we have to sand deep, we would need to stop and put another coat later, but we're not going to have to sand all that deep because, number one, it's wood, so we've got a nice smooth finish compared to maybe an acrylic. But number two, I don't feel a lot of tool marks in it, so I'm really happy with how that turned down. So let me get my CA, and we'll do a little sanding. I've slowed the lathe down to about 850 RPMs, and we're just going to apply a coat of thin CA. That thin CA has had plenty of time to dry. I'm going to go ahead now and run through my grits of sandpaper, 120, 240, 320, and 400, and then we'll come back when we're ready to apply a finish to this pen. the blank turned out looking pretty darn good. I was surprised because I put the CA on and it did not dry. My CA is getting old, and because it's old, it stayed kind of tacky, and that made sanding a veritable nightmare. It was just crazy. However, we got it sanded. What I'm going to do now is clean it up, see how it looks, and then we will apply a CA finish to really finish this pen off. I'm using denatured alcohol, and I'm just going to work back and forth to try to get as much debris out of the grain as possible. And now we'll go ahead and flip the lathe on. Whoops. My dust collector must have knocked it down a little bit there. All right. See how that blank looks. All in all, she looks pretty darn nice. I'm going to break out a fresh bottle of CA, and we're going to go ahead and start putting a finish on this blank. That's much better. Take a look at how the blank shines. Remember when I put the first coat on earlier to stop the bleeding, it just didn't shine right away? That was a dead giveaway to me that the glue was getting old. I was worried about it, and like I said, it did actually gum up. So this is going to work out really nice. I'm going to go ahead and put about 5 coats of thin on here. Then I'm going to go ahead and apply maybe 3-4 coats of medium. We'll take a look at the blank to see if there's any grain showing. And if there is, we'll go ahead and apply more coats. Otherwise, we will show you the blank prior to micromeshing. The CA has dried on my blank, and I'm ready to go ahead and run through the micromesh pads. When you're using the micromesh on a CA finish, you don't want to spend a lot of time with the first few micromesh pads anyway, because you don't want to take the finish off. You just want to feel the rough areas, and you want to clean them up, and then you want to move on. So that feels pretty good. We're going to go ahead now and dry that off a little bit. We're going to run through the rest of the pads, and we'll come back and look at it when it's ready to be polished. I'm just finishing up with the final pad, and this blank is really starting to shine. You can see the reflection of the light above the lathe in the blank, and I just absolutely love when that starts to show through. And I'm just really working the last pad. Let's stop and take a look at that. Oh, wow. That is beautiful. Oh, and it's just as smooth as glass from end to end. Okay, I'm going to put a little Renaissance wax on this, and then I'm going to lay this blank aside while I work on the second blank. And we'll come back and buff both blanks at the same time. But just look at that. Absolutely gorgeous. Got the Renaissance wax going on. Get a little more on there. I'm really going to wax it up because I'm just going to let it set. And then I'm looking forward to buffing it off. All right, we're just going to set this aside, let that wax just dry on it, and that won't hurt anything, and we'll buff both blanks simultaneous. I'm preparing to chuck up the second blank, and we're going to put a bushing in the back, and notice the front. This is where the loose tube is, so this will be the front of the pin. We'll slide the bushing in there, and we'll go ahead and chuck her up between centers. These are, I want to show these are turn between center bushings with a 60-degree dimple in them that are designed for slimline pins. So you can actually turn slimline pins between centers. I'm going to run my gouge over the grinder, get a nice sharp edge on it, and we'll be back to turn momentarily. This blank looks amazing. I am right on the bushing at the back end. The front end, I can feel just a hair, maybe a 64th of an inch lip there. It's so tiny, but we're looking at walnut and we're looking at maple right there. So that'll sand really nice and we'll be able to take that right down to the tube. I don't want to do too much turning because if you remember, this is going to be the nib end and the tube is just slid in there. It's not glued to the inside of the blank. So we're going to be really, really careful with that. But we're ready to start sanding. So I'm going to go ahead and run through all of my grits and I'll come back and show you what this blank looks like. I just finished sanding and I want to go ahead and clean this up with a little denatured alcohol. I'll spin it by hand to keep it shiny. This is kind of a preview of what it's going to look like when the CA goes on. This is going to be a gorgeous blank. I am just about ready to start applying that CA. We're going to let this denatured alcohol dry, and I'm going to go ahead and put 5 coats of thin, 3 coats of medium, and we'll come back and show it to you and let you see what it looks like right before we go to micromesh. I just finished with the CA, and there are some high areas. We are ready for micromesh, but I think before I micromesh, I'm going to hit this with some 600. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little bubble right there. And there's one right there. And one right there. So I'm going to use a little 600. I probably will wet it just to keep it from getting too hot, building up too much heat. And I'm going to go ahead and sand this and make sure it's smooth from end to end prior to micromeshing. Got my sandpaper wet. What that does is that keeps the dust down from the CA glue. You really don't want to be breathing that CA glue. You don't really want to breathe it when you apply it, and you don't want to breathe it when you are sanding it because it's just nasty. Cyanoacrylate, so it's got cyanide in it, is my take on it. So, yeah, don't breathe that stuff. Oh, yeah, this is feeling good. I got those high areas worked down. It feels great all through there. I'm finishing up with the final grit of the micro mesh, and once again I'm working it extra long, just trying to bring out as much of that shine as possible. It's really looking good. When you start seeing a clear line all the way across your blank, yeah, that's a really good sign. And I'm so nervous about this blank. I've been keeping everything wet because I don't want to build up any heat. You know, I mean, it's just really had me on the edge. Let's go ahead and turn this off, take a look at it. I think it's pretty well, look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? And it's just as smooth as a sheet of glass. That is beautiful. Okay, the micro mesh is finished. I want to go ahead now and we're going to put our Renaissance wax on it, and then we're going to get both of these blanks buffed up. Once again, I'm just really going to work a lot of wax in there and just work it in. Running at about 1200 RPMs. This is the first blank, and we're going to go ahead and just take our time and buff it up. I want to be real careful once again. I don't want to let it set too long in one spot because I really don't want to build up the heat. You know, these segments are very thin once they're turned down to, especially to a slimline, and I want to make sure that I keep them cool because heat will cause that glue to break free. This is really looking nice. We're ready for blank number 2. Let's assemble the mechanical pencil first. Now, I've looked at this pencil and I really like it to point like this. So this is going to be the front of my pencil, and I've got this little cap piece that plugs in here, and I'm going to put a bushing on the back to protect it as I press everything. So we'll just press that in there, and let's open this up. Now this will be a little bit of a trick one-handed here. There we go. Okay. Make sure we line that up to where it's nice and square. And then we're just going to press it into place. Nice and easy. Okay, beautiful. Beautiful. Okay, we can take the bushing out. Won't need that any longer. Now what we're going to do is press the back end of the mechanical pencil in, and that involves, that involves this little cap, which has a hole in it. That's what the eraser comes through. We're going to slide that through the clip. We're going to insert the clip. I'm sorry, insert the cap, and we will, I just want to make sure everything is square because these are long, so they're a lot harder to make sure they're square. You've got to be really careful as you press these together. And I tell you what we're going to do. I'm going to flip this around because with that end so far away from me, it's hard for me to watch. There we go. I just want to get her started, and now we're going to look around, and I think, I don't know, maybe like, I don't want to cover up that red. That red is too beautiful, that Paduke. So we're going to put it right about there. Now we can go ahead and finish pressing the pen together. All right. Now we take our lead, our mechanism, we slide it in the back. The front nib actually threads on, so we're going to thread that on. There we go. And this goes over the eraser. And our mechanical pencil is ready to use. Let's take a close look at that. That certainly is beautiful. I love it. A little dust on it there. I thought that was a nick, but it's just dust. All right, let's go ahead and put our pen together. For our pen, we're going to go ahead and slide our tube. You can see there is no tube inside of that blank. We're just going to slide the tube in. We're going to put the bushing on there for protection. And we're going to go ahead and we'll put the cap into the clip, and then we will set that on the back of the pen. And now we're just going to get that started, and then we'll adjust our clip. Just want to, shucks, I want to be real careful there. There we go. No undue pressure. And you know what? I'll tell you what, that's about the right spot because I really like that. I really like that dark wood there. All right, let's go ahead and finish the press. Just being super careful to keep everything as square as possible. Okay, good. The clip is tight. We can pull out our front tube. Now, what we're going to do here, we'll get our bushing out of the way. We don't need that any longer, is we're going to press, let's press the cap into, actually, I'll bring that bushing back. Let's press the cap into this tube. Okay. All right, shouldn't be too bad. We're just going to press the, there we go, the brass tube on. Now we no longer need the bushing. So we've just got our nib on there. Now we're going to take our transmission and we're going to press our transmission in. And this is where we got to be really careful. I'm going to press up till the brass is, let me get one more of these on here. I'm going to press this little brass piece of the transmission all the way until the end of the brass. Now it should not be the proper size. Let's go ahead and pull this little rubber nib off of here. This should thread in. It should not fit perfectly at this point. Oh, but it does. Wow, check that out. I expected to have to push it farther in. I will be honest, I do think that that probably needs to go a tiny bit farther in. So we're going to give it just a tap. And you can see back here at the back of this pen, you've got this line here. Normally you press somewhere between the brass and the line. So we're going to go just a little bit farther. I want to be super careful with it. There we go. You got to be careful because you'll start to put pressure on it and then all of a sudden that thing will go. And when it goes, there's just no bringing it back. Oh, no, that's much better. Look at that. That's a perfect extension. All right. Now what we want to do is we're going to slide this into the body of the pen. And when it meets when the transmission meets the back tube, you can just twist the nib to eject the ink. And there you have it. That's our modified mechanical pencil. and Modified Slimline. I think they make a beautiful pair. I just love these Chaos blanks. I really hope you enjoyed watching this video as much as I enjoyed making this Modified Slimline and Modified Mechanical Pencil from one of my new batch of Chaos blanks. I said it at the beginning of the video, and I'm going to say it again now. Jack McCauley, thank you so much for your extraordinarily generous gift of a lens for my camera. You have made this channel better for everyone watching it, and I truly appreciate it. And I know that you said all you wanted was for me to make you a Modified Slimline pen, but buddy, I'm going to send you that along with a Modified Mechanical Pencil. You need a set for what you did, and I truly appreciate it, so thank you very much. Thank you to everybody for watching this video. I want you to know that you are always welcome in my shop. Come back and see me again real soon, and have a great evening, everybody.